I'm pretty sure I did not hand these out. So I gave a few. I gave a few of these, so I'm going to give. I'm 99% sure I did not hand these out. Everyone check. Do you have a chapter 17? I don't think you do. Chapter 17 and chapter 19. And chapter 19 is crazy. They packed way too much in that. I'm pretty sure you don't have that.
I don't have that.
Yeah, so I gave a few. Thank you. Everybody take one. I think I gave one out in this row, so here's 4. I think I gave 2 out to this row. I think I gave 1 out to this row. This is exciting. Everybody in this row gets one. Isn't that?
This is chapter 17.
Okay, so originally chapter 17, you have 749 to 771 due. And originally I meant to do on Tuesday, but it's going to be due on Wednesday, so I didn't get as far as I wanted. So we'll have a quiz on just a regular reading quiz on Wednesday. Also on Wednesday, I'll start out answering questions about the semester final. I'll start giving you hints, go through what I'm looking for, that kind of stuff. And we're just going to read all these. What else? These pants. All right, we're going to go. And trying to think of anything else I'm forgetting. Nope, so 749 to 771 for Wednesday. Okay, did we get the credit mobilier? Did we get yet? All right, let's get back to credit mobilier. We had the 2 railroads. Let's see if we remember what railroad started here in beautiful Omaha and went westward for the transcontinental. Do you remember what railroad that was? Yeah, and which one came this one? Who was the head of the Central Pacific? Become governor of California. Yeah, Leland Stanford. And the Central Pacific for laborers used immigrants from many from China, and the Union Pacific immigrants, or I'm sorry, what kind of some immigrants that were known as what? Yeah, Patty, because so many were Irish, and also a lot of freedmen. And so let's get to the credit mobilier. This is the biggest scandal. Did we get in? I think we just got to what it did. Does this sound? Does this look right? So basically, Union Pacific. Did we finish it? Okay, so they overcharged 1,000% to build the railroad. So Union Pacific owners created a company to build the railroad, and then they turned around and overcharged Union Pacific. So they kind of overcharged themselves. It's a little more complex than that, but that's essentially what they did. And then they went back to Congress begging poverty and asked for more subsidies and got a double. I don't know why I started with it. I think I meant to put a hyphen there. For some reason I put a parenthesis. And then they paid themselves big raises. That's why we quit, right? So how did they get this through Congress? Such a blatant bribe that it's almost ridiculous. It wasn't just money, it was more clever than that. They gave members of Congress and Grant's cabinet stock in the Credit Mobilier Company. So now they have a vested interest in the Credit Mobilier Company to make money, which solely made money on overcharging the Union Pacific and therefore overcharging the government. And the owners were stockholders. These are something called corporations. We will get to what corporations are, but they're not like other companies. One of the reasons why they so dominate our lives today. So this finally became public, and it was a massive scandal, which seems almost quaint today, that there'd be a scandal about someone enriching themselves from government. If you know what's going on right now, you would understand what I'm talking about. But It tainted all of Congress for the next 20 years. 20 years. So all you had to do is be tied to the credit mobilier scandal. And it was clever. Oh, thank you. So, but this also showed the marriage between government and business. Remember the big subsidies for the Transcontinental Railroad Act? It showed if you can influence Congress by direct bribes here, but just indirectly, or just how you get elected to Congress. It was a way to make money. The marriage between government and business would really take off in this era and go on to this very day. But don't forget, Tea Act. And that's kind of what happened with the Tea Act. That directly led to the American Revolution. And now the United States is doing it many times over. So this shows the lines in red. It kind of, it's actually not this many railroads now. But you can see how the expansion of railroads took place. 1890, a massive expansion. 1950, blanketing the United States. But nativist feeling exploded. And the first ever anti-immigration act would happen directly out of the building of the Central Pacific and then other railroads that would contract out for Chinese labor. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, and it would be renewed in 84, 88, etc. And first one, and it was nativist. And even though they tied to the idea that somehow they were taking jobs, it was also that they're not real Americans, whatever that means. So playing racism. This is kind of shocking. But here's the Exclusion Act and kicking out Chinese. In the Qing Dynasty, men had to wear long braids. That's what it's having right here. And here, it's nativist feeling many times over. So look at the way they draw the faces of immigrants chewing up the United States. Irish immigrant, Chinese immigrant. Chewing up what is the real America. And then the Chinese immigrant will chew up the Irish immigrant. So very, very much tied to race. In fact, we are about 20 years for the term racism to come out. About 20 years from this. So all this is kind of tied together. So the first one ever, we're coming to a massive anti-immigration law in 1924. It's kind of culminating up to that. So that's Montana. And that's the major railroad that went through Montana and the Northern Pacific. The Great Northern Pacific was so corrupt, it went into bankruptcy 7 times. The people took their land grants, the owners, and just pocketed the money and then allowed themselves to go bankrupt. But it was such an important railroad that the government bailed them out all 7 times. Until it was scooped up by a private railroad that didn't use subsidies called the Great Northern, which actually ironically made it because they weren't corrupt, as corrupt. And the Great Northern would eventually become the Burlington Northern, which is now the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, which is the largest railroad monopoly in America. I'll tell you more about how those function down the road. So, with the railroad now, starting with the Transcontinental, coming into the Great Plains, that is going to divide the buffalo, the massive bison herd. Keep calling it buffalo. Sorry, I work on that. Of course, I'm going to do it again. They're not buffalo, they're bison, but I'm going to say it again. It divided the bison herd in 2, and the numbers of bison began to drop incredibly fast. You disrupt the migratory patterns, reproduction rates drop dramatically. And we're not even to the massive waves of buffalo hunters, but that's going to trigger a massive blast. Now, you remember the Battle of Tippecanoe, I hope. And Tippecanoe would be like the last chance American Indians had to stop the expansion of the United States. That's back in 1811. So every battle after that, every fight is part of a tragedy. And people living through a terrifying last stand. But the railroads, it's going to accelerate. Faster than anyone thought it would, let's say in 1860s. It's horrible last stand. And here, yeah, they would. This is obviously kind of over dramatized, but they would take pot shots at bison when they rode by on the train. So that is not far from the truth. Basically, the idea is that kind of joked about before in a dark way. It's alive, we must kill it. What do you think that group of people looks out there? I think those are finding the new school, mission that you're gonna just live in the construction next year. That's where the shop is gonna be, like, been huge. And we're gonna have construction, wait till you see when the park connection. Hope you're ready to walk. As I understand, you have to park in Townsend. It takes a long time. That's it. It's a really good thing, but I can say that pretty much we're not going to really do. Hey, that's life, right? It's for the next generation. Don't you feel happy for CR? Moving on. So this will trigger what we call the Plains Indian Wars. I mentioned them as the Indian Wars. And this is the last stand, 1860 to 1890 in this Gilded Age. And it'll start, the main battles will begin in the South. That's where the first real wave of citizens of the US coming into the Great Plains, Texas up. And then the last wave would be in Montana. And so we're going to do mostly Montana. I got to pick and choose. We don't have time to go through every one, and I think you get that. But there's certain things I have to tell you. Well, let's get to the United States tactics. The US tactics goes back as long as been colonization. So you're going to see every empire do this. All the way from this, the Assyrians and the Hittites, Egyptian, Roman Empire, British Empire, and now the United States. Divide and conquer. These tribes fought bitterly against each other, so pick one against the other, just like what happened. First battles here. Heck, when U.S. forces under Andrew Jackson defeated the Creek, the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in 1813, the Choctaw joined them because they were jealous of the Creek. In Montana, the Lakota moved in here and defeated the Crow, so the U.S. used the Crow to defeat the Lakota and then turned on the Crow. Etc. Divide and conquer as old as empires. As old as empires. And then, when they were defeated, they call it the policy of concentration, but soon reservations. And that was going to be Indian territory. Remember the Indian Removal Act way back in 1830? What is going to become Oklahoma. I don't know, I have a map there, but I want to walk over to my other map, right here. But what about those who will not willingly go to reservations? Well, total war. Sometimes you see it called economic warfare, even though it's total war. And remember total war where you make civilians suffer so much that they want to end the fight? Well, that's what you do. Put forts all over the plains. All these in black are major forts all over to restrict movement, to hem them in, and then starve them to death. What is the basis of their survival? The bison. Kill the bison. If the bison are gone, they have to go to reservations or starve. And that will open up the land for farming and ranching for the citizens of the United States to take. So that's the plan. And the bison are already dropping because of hunting, but it's going to fall like a rock because of the Transcontinental Railroad and what that will bring. So that's American tactics. So it starts here and then goes up to here. And it's brutal. Think about it. When this all begins, the Civil War is going on. That's where they first really have total war. The term isn't quite there yet, but that's what we call it today. And by 1869, Grant is president. Sherman, who did the March to the Sea, he's the commander of the United States Army. Phil Sheridan, the guy who charged up Missionary Ridge, remember I told you about him being 5 foot 420 pound, and then but Custer made it, or I'm sorry, he would become head of cavalry. He's the head of the Western Department of the United States Army. They learned to fight in the Civil War, and they brought those tactics to the plains. and brutalized the tribes. Bill Sheridan. Bill Sheridan would be the overall commander. And proteges like George Custer. Fine cavalry commanders in the Civil War who also won fame. All right. So what did the Army do? Beginning in the 1860s, but accelerating in the 70s, well, until the lives are basically gone. They protected the buffalo hunters. And then the railroads allowed for more to come in and the hides to ship west or ship east. And the U.S. Army would protect. So the first buffalo hunters that were set out in great numbers were to feed the miners. And then it was just simply to make money, but also kill the bison, kill the remaining bison, and destroy the tribes. And the thing about bison, they don't have, an adult bison has no real natural predators. An adult. And so they don't really fear as they should people. All they would have to do is kill the lead bison. And they would just live. So a 3-person hunting team could set up their hunting rifle, which was a big 50 to 75 caliber rifle. Those of you who think about rifles know how big of a bullet that is. And they would set up their rifle, 3-person teams with a shooter on a tripod made of rocks, and they could just pick up, bang, 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 until they run out of ammunition. There are stories of one 3-person team killing 1,000 bison. Bang. They'd kill so many that they would start skinning, which was the worst job of it, and not even come close to eating these yards. So they just leave the carcasses there. They're rot to rot on animals. They would cut the tongue, and they all want to eat the tongue. Who's that tongue? You? Just weird eating tongue. They loved it. Yeah. But you combine that with the railroads and the disruption of migration, and the numbers drop dramatically from like 30 million in 1860 to probably less than 15 million by 1870. Happened so fast, it's just mind-boggling. And the hides they did ship back, they would ship them they would pile them up and then take them to wagons to the nearest railhead on the railroads and ship them east. They make these big bales, like bales of cotton, but big bales of pelts. And what would they do with all those? Over 1 million pelts. Okay. Some coats, but they're way too heavy. Bison hide, thick, that thick, really thick and hard. Not really, a few, but it was just too thick, too uncomfortable. Yeah. A few, but not that many. Not really. And that you would think trees would be pretty good, but it was so difficult to work with. The second industrial revolution needs belts for the wagons. Big, heavy belts. Perfect. What happened to all the bones? I mean, you would think with millions of bison dying, there should be bones all over. You can't find bison. You can't find them. You just can't. So in Kansas in the early 1870s and Montana in the 1890s, they begin to gather up all the bones. This is one of the more famous pictures. Those are just skulls. That's in western Kansas. This is Montana. Just gathered them and did what with them? Shipped them east on the railroads. They were all ground up to fertilizers. There's going to be barely over 2,000 lives by 18. So that's the beginning. And you can imagine what's going to happen with the tribes. They're going to fight back those who could. So I'm going to focus on a couple battles in Montana, but it always got to start with Sand Creek. Sand Creek is, excuse me, like I'm not surprised. That's much more important than mastery. So Colorado go boom, they need food. They went out hunting in the Cheyenne. So the powerful Cheyenne, right, we got this from the Fort Laramie Treaty back in 1851. That's Cheyenne. Cheyenne. And so great hunting ground right here. So you have these buffalo hunters going out and just beginning to really put a dent in the buffalo herd, the bison herd. It was not quite there yet. And so they fought back and they started harassing and killing some hunters. Well, this is right in the middle of the Civil War. There was some fighting in Colorado. There were Confederates right here. So there was some fighting there. So there was militia in the new boomtown of Denver and some regular soldiers pretty well trained. And they went out to protect the bison hunters. So U.S. mostly militia, but they're well armed because of the Civil War. John Chivington was their commander, a colonel, looking for fame. This is right in the middle of the Civil War, 1864. And so the best time for the United States Army to fight nomadic tribes of the plains was the winter when they're hunkered down. In the summer, they move, they can scatter, they know the terrain, they move much faster than the army. But in the winter, the tribes hunker down in one spot to survive the winter. And their plan was to attack a couple of these Cheyenne encampments that were attacking the buffalo hunters, basically to terrify the rest so they could attack the buffalo hunters. Chivington was so incompetent they couldn't find him. They couldn't find anybody. But they came across an encampment of Cheyenne who, okay, as I mentioned before, the British in the United States always look for the man in charge, a chief. Even though the tribes have much more complex hierarchy, they're a little bit more male-oriented than the Eastern tribe, but it's more complex than that. So this was called Black Kennel's Academy. And he already signed an agreement with the United States that he would actually defend buffalo hunters because his encampment, they had lost a couple of fights, they've been devastated by disease. So he's even flying an American flag to show that he was not attacking the buffalo hunters. But Chivington couldn't find anybody else, so what did they do? They just did a surprise attack. And even though Black Kettle knew they were there, they just assumed we're not going to be attacked. And Chivington's order was to kill everybody, every adult. And they asked, and one of his subordinates asked, should we kill children? And they said, yes. Chivington responded with yes, because nits make nits. Excellent. Kill them. And that gives you an idea of what they thought about Americans. And so they attacked. The only thing that saved over half of Black Kettle's encampment and Black Kettle himself were that Chivington's men were so drunk, the attack just broke down to this disorganized rabble. But still, almost 200 people would be killed. Now, this is a marker there, and it says Santa Creek Battle, but it was not. It was. This is a picture of it. I should add, was the Lincoln administration happy about this, or were they upset about what Chivington did? They presented it as a victory. Election years coming up, they presented it as a strategy of the United States. But this is going to become, this massacre would become the template of future wars. Winter attack before sunup, and they know the best way to stop the fires is to attack the non-combatants, children. Women did fight, but very rarely, and also the elderly. That became the strategy. Total war. So, Sand Creek. Now let's go a little bit further north, and let's get to the Montana gold mines. Well, you have the Montana gold mines. They have to get food and supplies there. And John Bozeman would chart out a trail basically from Fort Laramie up into the gold mines, Virginia City, the Bozeman Trail. Gee, I wonder what city's going to be named after him. Billings, ironically, isn't it? So Bozeman Trail. And you go there, there's elements of the trail that still exist. Well, this went right through, actually, Crow land, but it was Lakota, and remember the Cheyenne right here. And this will trigger oh, I forgot. To protect this, after the Civil War, the Army, which is now significantly smaller, tiny, on reconstruction duty, so stretch them, 3 forts along the trail. Smith, Phil Kearny, and Fort Reno. Phil Kearny was the most important in the middle. If you go there, it's a really cool area. And the fort is well preserved. It's a state monument. And yeah, this would trigger Red Cloud's War. So the Lakota Sioux decided to cut off that trail. And Red Cloud was one of their most prominent fighters. And he was also very pragmatic, understanding that, okay, we got to cut this off here, because if we don't, go overruns. There seems to be a never-ending supply of people from the US. Or as they would have said, more and more, it's always kind of be racialized, unfortunately, I think. White men. So, there are going to be a series of battles right here at Fort Phil Kearny. Over 100 US cavalrymen under William Fetterman, he was a captain, rode out of Phil Kearny right into an ambush, and all of them would be. So we call it the Fetterman fight, or the Fetterman. I knew it as a Fetterman massacre, but it was a fight to the death. Yes, just less than 100 cavalrymen and literally a cutting crew to cut down trees for firewood. In their using the wagons as defense, held off over 300 Lakota and won a victory. So the point was, it was a seesaw battle. The Lakota really good hit one attack. These incredibly brave soldiers, but the U.S. Army had the advantage of discipline and training. And this is actually the marker at the wagon boss fight. That's one of those pictures I took that turned out really cool. Just happened to be there when the sun was going down. Yeah, it's like 30 pictures. That one turned out great. So what a great photography. It's really neat if you go. That's Red Cloud right here. First time I was there, I was probably 15. I went down there with my dad. No, I'd be 14. And it was in the summer. And that was at a time, there's more, but there they had kind of a plague of grasshoppers that summer. And there were so many grasshoppers on the highway, just a 2-lane highway, that you couldn't see them. And you drive down the highway and it sounded like popping. Because it wasn't running them over, it was the grasshoppers jumping up and hitting the bottom of the car. Just people, they're killing so many grasshoppers on the road that people were skidding off the road. We had to stop every 20 minutes to clean up the windshield. That was a plague of locusts hit us. That was a heck of a time. That was one that time, but I wish I would have had like today. You could take a bunch of pictures, then it's more difficult. So anyways, the Lakota won. At the Treaty of Fort Laramie, the United States decided it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it, and they basically closed down the trail, the forts. They closed them down. But Red Cloud and the others agreed to a reservation. And by agreeing to a reservation, they've accepted U.S. Now the United States said, if you go to the reservation, we will feed and house you for the rest of your life at Braulton. We'll care for you forever. That's payment for taking your land. Don't forget that. I'll come back to that. This will be called the Great Sioux Reservation. Massive, basically all of what is now western South Dakota. Then it was Dakota territory, one big territory. And then all this land would be open up for people on the reservation in the summer to go hunting stuff. The bison were still here. By this time, the bison were just about, it happened so fast. The herd was dying so fast in the south. The Black Hills was not part of the treaty, but would be off limits to the United States. The Black Hills were important because plants. It's one of the few sources of lots of pine trees, which are perfect for teepees. So it's incredibly important. The Lakota had just conquered it. They didn't want to give it up. There, we took it fair and square from other tribes. Remember, they fight each other all the time. Well, the culmination of this will be the Great Sioux War, 75 to 77. What happened was this. There was rumors that there was gold in the Black Hills. Has anyone been to the Black Hills? No one been to the Black Hills? Oh, really cool. Really, 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 really pretty. And it looks like a big black hump on the middle of the plains coming at you. They're rugged mountains out in the middle of the plains. If you get a chance, go. A lot of gaudy tourist places. Mount Rushmore is pretty cool, and the Chief or the Crazy Girls Monument's really, really cool. All right. Well, the 7th Cavalry was sent to go map the Black Hills in 1874. Led by their second in command, their commander was off to the east in other duty, was George Custer. Here's Custer right here with the Rigora and Crow Scouts. And they went to map the Black Hills. But Custer had publicity out and brought a bunch of reporters and they discovered gold. He also brought some prospectors. And they discovered gold. And what's that going to trigger? A gold rush. The Army was supposed to keep out people, but they didn't. A gold rush blatantly violated the treaty. And reservation life was not what they thought. It was much more difficult than the U.S. presented it, especially how corrupt they were on the reservation. And this is going to trigger a mass exodus of 1875 into 1876 of reservation members, Lakota, but also Cheyenne, to the Great Bison Range here, which they also, and some never went to the reservation, non-treaty Indians they were called. They stayed in this area here. So they went to join them. And when they would not come back, this infuriated the United States, who wants, we're going to be in Bay. This is our land. I should add, the Northern Pacific was just about to be built. So they didn't want those tribal members there. They wanted to open this up to homesteads and mining and etc. So Grant was president and he had this plan to try to have better relations with the American Indians. It was called his peace plan. It just ended. And the United States Army, which is still incredibly small, began a three-pronged assault to try to run down the tribes and defeat them. Defeat them in battle and force them to give in completely. So force a fight. So all these teepees, this is from a West Point map. They study all these battles. Huge amount right in this area here. U.S. forces here, that would also include the 7th Cavalry. Custer would be in command. Forces from Bozeman and forces here to hem them in. That's the plan. They knew there was someplace in here. Now, we don't have the details to go to all of it, but we'll get to the culmination of this battle. The climactic battle, even though it was the defeat of the U.S., it would spell the doom for the Lakota. It'd be the battle a little big. June 25th, 1876. Oh, I didn't put that in context. I can't go into great detail of the battle. Has anyone been to the battlefield in here? A few? Good. It's really well preserved. Unfortunately, there's been such cutbacks in the last year in the National Park Service. It's only open 3 days a week now. It used to be open every day of the week. They just don't have as many interpreters now because there's been so many cutbacks that have not saved money. But this is endemic in all the national parks. Back to this. What happened was the main force, they met up here, the Montana wing and the North Dakota wing. They met here and they sent Custer on a patrol, basically to try to push the the tribes into a battle someplace here. And he stumbled across an encampment that was the biggest they had ever seen on the plains. Probably 4,000 to 5,000 people on the plains. Rarely was it over 300 or 400. That was big. Lack of food, they gotta move. So seeing that many was unusual. Custer, assuming that they would run away immediately, ordered a very hastily, totally unprepared attack, where he divided his force into 4 and attacked. Now, there's many important leaders of the Lakota, but the 2 most important would be Sitting Bull, who by this time was too old to fight. He'd been wounded so many times. I'll finish it tomorrow. Sound good? Oh, I can see that, yeah. What? Well, it helps them. You do it. Goodbye, everybody. And I'm gonna argue, good luck. Yeah, the rug just folds right back. Isn't that amazing? What a rug.
Thanks.
Calm down, everybody. The rug is still here tomorrow. Yeah.
All I listen to. You're a big one.
And I'm old, so I get it.
I don't know, man. I have goodies. I love goodies, man.
If you were gone yesterday, you gotta pick this up. Those of you who skip. I do.
I didn't wrestle at all, but no boys varsity overall one.
I saw that they won, but you didn't, why did you?
Because apparently the farther away you get from Helen, the less upper classes or upper weight classes they have. So I had no one to.
So you get 5s.
So yeah, we had
You
5s.
won.
Okay, I didn't win because my partner that I usually wrestle with, she's also 170, so she got 5s.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know why they didn't move me up to 190, but they just didn't.
But they just don't have enough wrestlers out there.
And they're like, they have quite a few, like some of them have enough for the whole team, but they're all just.
You want the credit a couple years ago. He's great.
Yeah, that, I can see that.
Carson was part of the credit scandal. I knew. I made so much money. It was great.
Where's my cut?
Seven stole it.
Typical.
Yeah, me and Carson split profits, but I threw him under the bus.
Well, no loyal